Economist Jim Stanford says today's interest rate hike is another nail in the coffin when it comes to Canada's economic recovery from the pandemic. Stanford has been critical of the Bank of Canada's strategy to curbing inflation, saying it doesn't actually address food or fuel prices for everyday Canadians. Kelly Botello has that story.
This is a recession that is absolutely man-made. It's deliberately engineered.
Economist and director of the Centre for Future Work, Jim Stanford, says raising interest rates does not address the root of inflation.
Inflation is obviously a problem, particularly for workers whose wages have not remotely kept up with prices and for people on low incomes. But throwing the economy into a recession isn't going to make that better. Clearly, we have to address the root causes of the inflation that we've seen in the last year and a half. The major ones are energy price spikes, the bubble in the housing market, which has driven up housing costs, and of course, very high grocery prices. And the government could be taking measures to address that by helping fix supply chains, helping roll out more affordable housing in Canada so housing prices come down, and taking a look at the role of company profits in driving up prices.
Senior economist for BMO Capital Markets, Sal Guattieri, says today's increase of 50 basis points is less than most expected. However, he suspects that's because the Bank of Canada is worried about recession.
Two messages from the Bank of Canada: rates will need to continue to rise. But at the same time, it looks like the Bank of Canada is starting to get worried about the economy and not just inflation. So it is worried that it could be over-tightening policy, which could tip the economy into recession.
Senior economist at TD Bank, James Orlando, thinks that we could be nearing the peak.
We were wondering when the peak of policy rates were going to happen. It kept being that they were going to go higher and higher, and expectations kept increasing. And with the Bank of Canada's pivot today, focusing on how the data might evolve in the future and that inflation might come down in the future, I think Canadians are able to see a potential peak in policy happening by the end of this year.
But what does a recession look like for the average Canadian?
In a severe recession, hundreds of thousands of Canadians are going to lose their jobs. We're going to see the unemployment rate jump from 5% today to likely 8% or even higher in a year or two. We're going to see Canadians lose their homes because the combination of higher interest costs and lost jobs is going to make it impossible for Canadians to service their mortgages. I expect the next couple of years are going to be very painful for Canadians, and the worst part of it is it doesn't have to be this way.
While one or two more interest rate increases are still expected, Stanford says the Canadian government needs to be prepared to get to work if or when a recession occurs.
More public investment, I would argue, in supply chains and infrastructure. That helps to address the root causes of the inflation that we've been experiencing, as well as income supports for people who lose their jobs.
The Bank of Canada's next rate announcement is scheduled to take place December 7th. For Trending Now, I'm Kelly Botello.